He looked me in the eye and said, "You'll just have to learn to live with not being paid." I had worked for free all winter, kept my crew afloat, and trusted a man I once called a friend. That day, I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I started a company, and 3 months later, he was bankrupt. If you've ever been lied to, underestimated, or cheated by someone you trusted, this story is for you. Hit subscribe, like this video, and stay with me, because the revenge you're about to hear isn't just sweet, it's justice, served cold and loud. There's a certain kind of silence that creeps in around December in the Pacific Northwest. For some, it's peaceful. For others, it's a signal to hibernate. For me, that year, it felt like opportunity. My name is Alyssa Monroe. I was 35 at the time, a single mom, a business owner, and the kind of woman who believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt. For nearly a decade, I had run a small but proud landscaping company. We weren't flashy. We didn't chase glamour projects. But we were consistent, reliable, and honest, 3 words that would come back to haunt me later. Every March through November, my team of 4 worked from sunrise to sunset, rain or shine. But when winter came, the ground froze, leaves stopped falling, and we laid low. December through February meant layoffs, which always tore me up. My crew wasn't just labor. They were people. Real ones. The kind who showed up early and stayed late without being asked. And I hated the thought of sending them home empty-handed for 3 months. So when an opportunity came, unexpected, unorthodox, and a little risky, I took it. Howard Griggs was a name I'd known for a while. A high-end home builder, big fish in a small town. His houses weren't just homes. They were luxury statements, carved into hillsides and sprawled across acres. We had maintained his personal property for almost a year, and he'd taken a liking to my work, said it was precise, clean, professional. So when he asked if I'd bid to do full landscape installs on 4 of his newest builds, I was floored. Install work wasn't our bread and butter, but we took the leap. We learned on the job, hustled hard, and delivered. He seemed impressed. Said he wanted more. But then he pivoted. It was early December. We were wrapping up the 4th house when Howard invited me into his trailer and offered me something strange. "I've got something new in the works," he said, leaning back in his leather swivel chair. "Spray foam insulation. My son's been dabbling in it. We're going to start a company. We could use a solid crew for the winter." I blinked. Insulation? That's a pretty far cry from mulch and sod. He chuckled. "You can learn it fast. Besides, you told me you hate letting your crew go during winter." "I'm offering steady work, Alyssa. And I admit, the idea of keeping my guys employed through December, January, and February was tempting. No more scrambling to find them odd jobs. No more sleepless nights wondering how they'd make rent. I asked a few questions. He answered just enough of them to sound competent. He said he had the equipment, the contracts lined up, and a plan. The money would be reliable once it starts flowing. I hesitated, but he pressed. 3 months, fixed contract, full pay. You'll be running your own team, under my son's supervision. We'll get through the winter together. Together. That word stuck with me. I talked it over with my crew. Most were hesitant, it was a new industry, with a steep learning curve. But work was work. So I called Howard the next morning and told him we were in. That's how I met Derek Griggs, Howard's son. A wiry, smug 20-something with a permanent smirk and the kind of handshake that tells you exactly how much he thinks of you. He was our on-site lead. And while he wasn't particularly cruel at first, he carried himself with the entitled swagger of someone who had never earned anything. Still, we made it work. Our first job was insulating a mansion owned by a plastic surgeon, a sprawling, high-tech beast of a house with built-in audio systems, a heated driveway, and robotic skylights. The kind of house where even the air felt expensive. We did the job. Then came another, government buildings at Fort Lewis. Then an apartment complex. Then another custom home. We got better. Faster. Smarter. But there was one thing missing. Pay. The contract had promised monthly checks. But January came and went. Nothing. Derek kept saying, "It's coming, relax," and Howard? He was practically a ghost. Too busy, too distant, too unavailable. But I believed them. I had to. So I did the unthinkable. I paid my crew out of my own pocket. I told myself it was temporary. That Howard would come through. That this was just a delay in the pipeline. And even when the second month rolled by with no check, I clung to the idea that good people do the right thing eventually. By March, my savings were gone. My line of credit maxed. My trust? Fraying. I started calling. Every morning. Then at lunch. Then again before dinner. Voicemails. Texts. Emails. Derek ignored all of it. Howard gave the same evasive answer every time, "We're working on it." And then came the real insult. It was April. Landscape season was ramping up again. We had contracts to prepare for, lawns to seed, tools to unearth. But I was broke, not just emotionally, but literally. The money from the spray foam jobs, plus the $10,000 Howard still owed me from our last landscaping install, was still unpaid. So I filed a contractor's lien on the property. That got Howard's attention. He invited me to lunch. To clear the air, he said. I wore my best boots and brought every invoice, every agreement, every time-stamped record I had. I walked in hopeful. He made sandwiches. We sat down at his polished granite kitchen island, and he spoke like he was reading a script written by every sleazy builder I'd ever met. "Look, Alyssa," he said, biting into his sandwich, "I've been stiff before. It happens. People screw you over. It's part of the business. You just have to learn to live with it." I froze. My appetite disappeared. "You're telling me I'm not getting paid?" I asked, flat. He smiled, like it was all some kind of joke. "That's not what I said. I said, sometimes you take hits." I stood up, calm as I could. "I've been screwed out of money too, Howard. But never by someone I called a friend." I left the sandwich untouched. I left the invoices on his kitchen counter. I left the idea of being polite behind. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I went home, pulled out a notebook, and started sketching the logo for my new company. That night, I didn't sleep. I researched spray foam equipment costs. I ran numbers. I called in every favor I had. I sold my car. I borrowed from a friend. I refinanced the damn house. And on May 5, 2009, I registered Northern Seal Insulation LLC. 2 days later, Howard called me, acting like nothing had happened. "Hey, Alyssa, I've got a question about lawn drainage." I cut him off. "Oh, I don't landscape anymore." He paused. "You don't?" "Nope," I said, sweet as poison. "I do spray foam insulation now." Click. 5 minutes later, Derek called. I smiled before I even picked up. "A little landscaper like you think she can make it in this town?" he sneered. I didn't answer. I let his threat hang in the air. Then I whispered to myself, "Watch me." The Pacific Northwest is known for its rain, but that spring, it felt like the sky itself was cheering me on. May rolled in with wet roads and cold mornings, and while most people curled up indoors, I was out hunting jobs. I was running on caffeine, vengeance, and the belief that if I moved fast enough, I wouldn't have time to second-guess myself. Starting Northern Seal Insulation wasn't easy. I wasn't an expert, not yet. But I was meticulous. I was the kind of woman who learned fast, asked questions, and never cut corners. And while Howard and Derek relied on swagger and name-dropping, I relied on truth, and that truth was about to pay off. The break came fast. 3 weeks into launching, my materials supplier, the very same one Derek used, gave me a call. I thought it would be awkward. I was expecting a cold shoulder or maybe a "we don't work with newcomers" line. But instead, he sounded tired, frustrated, and intrigued. "Alyssa," he said, "you worked on that big mansion, right? The surgeon's place?" I blinked. "Yes, we did. I handled prep and cleanup on that one before I broke off." He sighed through the phone. "We've got a problem." The spray foam was a disaster. Uneven. Gaps. Condensation buildup. Clients threatening legal action. The original crews refusing to come fix it. Derek won't return calls. "Think you can handle a correction job?" I didn't hesitate. Yes. That was my first official project, and it was poetic. The very house where I'd once hauled buckets and sweepers for Derek was now ground zero for my comeback. Walking into that house again felt surreal. The marble countertops still gleamed. The smart glass windows still hummed when they dimmed on command. But the insulation? It was a nightmare. Foam crumbling in corners. Damp spots near outlets. It looked like someone had sprayed whipped cream and called it engineering. The homeowner was a stern man in his 50s with deep-set eyes and a voice like sandpaper. He didn't want small talk. He wanted results. "Can you fix it?" he asked, arms crossed. "Yes," I said. "And I'll do it right this time." It took 10 days. We stripped the old foam with heat guns and sheer sweat. We reprepped every inch. We measured 3 times before spraying once. My crew, though green in this industry, worked like they had something to prove. Because they did. We all did. When it was finished, the homeowner walked the entire site with us. He didn't say much. He just nodded, handed me a check, and said, "You're not like the last ones." Then he sued the last ones. And he won. $65,000, plus damages. Derek's company name was all over the original invoice. My name? On the correction. That lawsuit didn't just sting, it made waves. In small industries, word spreads fast. First, whispers among suppliers. Then, murmurs among builders. Soon, I started getting calls, quiet, cautious ones. "Hey, I heard you cleaned up the mess on that surgeon's place. I've got a job, but I don't want Derek near it. You do things by the book, right?" Each time, I answered the same way: we show up. We do it right. And we don't lie. Within 6 weeks, I had 3 jobs lined up. 2 months in, my crew was booked solid. And that's when karma knocked again. The Fort Lewis job, the government contract that Howard's company had once bragged about landing, came up for reassignment. Derek had missed key deadlines, failed to submit compliance reports, and botched his last site visit. I got the call. Government contracts are tricky. You don't just walk in and get one. But when your competition hands you a golden ticket through sheer incompetence, you don't ask why, you just say thank you. When I showed up at the Fort Lewis site with my team, wearing our fresh navy blue Northern Seal uniforms, the looks we got said it all. Some recognized us. Some raised eyebrows. But no one said a word. We worked quietly. Perfectly. Professionally. Within a month, our contract was extended. And Derek? He was running out of jobs to mess up. I wasn't naive. I knew he was still out there, throwing tantrums, calling builders, probably bad-mouthing me in every bar with a half-priced whiskey. But bad work has a way of speaking louder than gossip. Still, not everything came easy. There were setbacks. Mistakes we had to fix. Sleepless nights where I lay staring at the ceiling, wondering if revenge had blinded me. But every time I saw my crew's paychecks clear, on time, every week, I remembered why I started. Not to destroy Derek. Not to punish Howard. But to prove that integrity beats entitlement every single time. By midsummer, I had become the name people whispered when they needed things done right. But the Griggs family wasn't done yet. One Thursday evening, just as I was closing shop, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I picked up. Is this Alyssa Monroe? Yes. This is Travis. I'm with Northwest Recovery. You don't know me, but I was hired to repossess some equipment belonging to Derek Griggs. My stomach tightened. And you're calling me because... He chuckled. Word is you might know where he stashed it. He owes a lot of people a lot of money, and we can't find the spray rig. I leaned back in my chair. The sky outside had turned lavender. My office smelled like coffee and insulation dust. And for the first time in months, I smiled without bitterness. You called the right woman, I said. And I meant it. Some people leave behind footprints. Derek Griggs left behind unpaid invoices and a digital trail of arrogance. When Travis, the repo man, called me that evening, I didn't just hear opportunity. I heard closure knocking. Last we saw him, Travis said, he was pulling his rig out of town. Haven't been able to pin him down since. I paused. I might know someone who can help, I replied. Enter my father-in-law, retired police officer, former private investigator, and the kind of man who still read people like open files. Though my ex-husband and I hadn't spoken in years, his dad, Richard, and I had stayed close. He respected grit. And I knew I'd find none more trustworthy to chase Derek's trail. When I explained the situation, Richard leaned back in his recliner, sipped his black coffee, and nodded once. Give me 2 days. He didn't ask for details. He didn't ask why I needed it. He just said it like a man who'd already started working the case the moment I opened my mouth. Meanwhile, I was juggling back-to-back jobs. Northern Seal was now a 6-person operation. I had bought a second rig, trained 2 more technicians, and signed on with 2 new developers who were actively building high-efficiency homes. Each day was a whirlwind of site visits, scheduling, quality checks, and customer calls. But under the buzz of success, I carried that small ember of unfinished business. Derek wasn't just a failed contractor. He was the final knot I needed to untangle before I could breathe again. Richard called me 42 hours later. Found it. Already? Island property. Private. He's got it stashed behind a barn. Tires are deflated. Looks like he tried to hide it. The man didn't waste words. I called Travis with the exact GPS coordinates. 2 hours later, he sent me a photo from his tow yard, a massive spray rig chained to his truck. In the background, Derek, red-faced, arguing with someone off camera. The look in his eyes? Cornered. And that, ironically, was the last I ever heard of him. Word spread, as it always does. Derek was out. Equipment repossessed. Debt collectors closing in. Builders dropping him like moldy drywall. By October, his company had dissolved completely. And Howard? His father? He hadn't fared much better. The market crash had already dealt him a vicious blow. 4 of his luxury homes sat unsold. Landscaping overgrown. Mortgages compounding. By November, his development company filed Chapter 11. The same kitchen where he once served me cold sandwiches and told me to live with it was now listed for foreclosure. I didn't gloat. I didn't send a card. But I did drive by one day. Not to be petty. Just to confirm that some storms really do make landfall where they're supposed to. What shocked me most wasn't the empty driveway or the rusted gate. It was how small the house looked now. Like everything he'd built had shrunk under the weight of his own deceit. Meanwhile, my life bloomed in unexpected ways. My son, Connor, finally saw me smile again. I had missed showing him what strength looked like when it wasn't drowning in stress. He helped me wash the trucks on weekends. Drew our logo in crayon and taped it on the fridge. I hired veterans. Women returning to the workforce. People who, like me, had once been counted out. We didn't work in silence. We laughed. We triple-checked our work. We sent out holiday cards with hot cocoa packets to every client. Integrity became our business model. Builders started requesting us by name. A local paper ran a short profile, From Grass to Greatness, how one woman took on the big dogs and won. It sat laminated in the lobby of our small office next to a Keurig and a jar of homemade cookies from a client. But more than the contracts, more than the money or the reputation, what I treasured most was the change inside me. For years, I had believed being nice was enough. That working hard and staying humble would shield me from betrayal. But that winter taught me something else. Kindness without boundaries becomes a magnet for users. And the moment I stood up, really stood up, the universe moved with me. One day in January, I got a call. "Is this Alyssa Monroe?" the voice said, cautious. "Yes. This is Glenn from Coastal Green Builders. We're building a series of eco-homes outside of Tacoma. I was referred to you by 4 people. Everyone says the same thing, that you're honest. And that you saved more than one project from disaster. Can we talk?" We talked. We signed. We expanded. We went from 1 rig to 3. From 4 employees to 14. I started mentoring young women looking to enter trades. I gave talks at the local community college. I volunteered for Habitat for Humanity projects. And slowly, the scars of that betrayal faded. Not because time healed them, but because I turned them into blueprints. You see, revenge isn't about destruction. Not really. It's about elevation. It's about becoming undeniable, not in spite of the people who wronged you, but because of them. The best revenge isn't making someone pay. It's thriving so loudly they can't ignore your name in the mouths of everyone they once tried to control. So no, I never got paid for that winter. But I built an empire on the ashes of their greed. And every time a new builder shakes my hand, every time a job site rings with the sound of steady work and fair wages, I remember that lunch, that smirk, that sandwich. And I smile. Because I was never just a landscaper. I was the storm they didn't see coming. Some reputations are made in the spotlight. Others are destroyed in whispers. After Derek's company dissolved and Howard's empire collapsed, you'd think that would be the end of it. But reputation has a long shadow, and theirs kept shrinking with each sunrise. The spray foam world is tight-knit. It's not like plumbing or drywall, where dozens of crews compete on the same block. No, in insulation, especially high-performance spray foam, people talk. Suppliers talk. Builders talk. Inspectors especially talk. And once the Griggs name became synonymous with lawsuits, broken contracts, and shady invoices, doors began to close fast. I saw it happen. Not all at once. Not in one big scandal. But piece by piece, like floorboards creaking under rot. Howard tried pivoting. He opened a shell company under a new name, Griggs Sustainable Living. A clean-sounding name. But the same habits. He reached out to some of my former clients, pitched new builds, offered discounts with vague timelines. One of them, a developer named Neil, called me in private. He offered me a 15% undercut on your quote, Neil said. But something in his voice felt off. And frankly, I'd rather pay more and sleep at night. I didn't have to say anything. I just nodded. By then, Northern Seal insulation had become the gold standard. We didn't just win jobs. We saved them. A builder once told me we were the company you call when you need the mess quietly cleaned before the inspector arrives. And that came with trust, not only from clients, but from suppliers. The very same supplier that had once worked with Howard and Derek now offered me discounts, early access to new tech, even invited me to speak at a regional conference. It was there, in a convention center ballroom under soft spotlights, that I saw Howard again. He wasn't on stage. He wasn't even at a booth. He was sitting at the back of the room, alone, in a rumpled button-down and an outdated name tag clipped to his jacket. I almost didn't recognize him. The Howard I had known stood tall, always commanding attention with a smile full of confidence and salesmanship. This man looked like he hadn't been listened to in a long time. Our eyes met for half a second. And in that glance, I saw something unexpected, not anger. Not resentment. Just recognition. As if he finally understood. Not what he had done to me, but what I had become. I didn't wave. I didn't approach. I walked on stage and spoke to a room of people who once wouldn't have returned my emails. I talked about ethics. About building something that lasts. About how short-term wins mean nothing if they leave people in ruins. I ended with a line I hadn't planned. Reputation is like insulation, if it's poorly installed, everything behind your walls starts to rot. Applause erupted. Howard stood up quietly and walked out before the clapping ended. Later that night, I learned he had been blacklisted by 3 supply chains. None would lend him credit. One had even required full prepayment due to repeated defaults. Meanwhile, I was in talks to acquire a struggling regional competitor, the same one Howard had tried to partner with before they backed out. The owner, a man named Miguel, met me over coffee and said, "We almost signed with Howard. But your name kept coming up, not just as competition, but as caution. He used to be the go-to guy. Now he's the warning story." It hit me then, this was more than revenge. This was replacement. Howard hadn't just lost work. He'd lost his place in the story. And Derek? The last I heard, he had moved down to Arizona, trying to start fresh. A builder in Flagstaff called me after receiving a weird proposal from a D. Griggs offering cut-rate insulation packages. The proposal was riddled with typos, inconsistent specs, and, cherry on top, fake references. I Googled him, the builder said. Saw the lawsuits. The court records. Then I saw your name. Figured I'd call and ask if the drama was real. It was, I said plainly. Thought so, he replied. Thanks for saving me some headaches. He didn't sign with Derek. He signed with me. Because that's how truth spreads. Not like wildfire. But like roots, deep, quiet, unshakable. Every site we completed added another layer. Every client who called us reliable added another brick. By the end of that year, Northern Seal had expanded into Oregon and Idaho. We were no longer the revenge project born out of betrayal. We were the standard. I'll never forget one moment in particular. It was a rainy Tuesday. I was in the office, helping a new hire finish onboarding paperwork, when one of my crew leaders walked in holding a tattered clipboard. On it was a job application, filled out in Derek's handwriting. At first, I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. Derek had applied for a crew position. Not supervisor. Not partner. Just a field-level sprayer. He didn't recognize the name Northern Seal. Maybe he thought it was just another company. Maybe he had gotten desperate. Maybe he didn't care. I looked down at the form. His phone number. His address. His signature, still a little cocky, like he couldn't quite admit the fall. I didn't call him. I didn't reject him. I didn't do anything. I slid the paper into the shredder and listened as it vanished. Because some revenge doesn't need an audience. Some victories don't need to be paraded. They just need to be quiet, final, and deserved. And in that moment, surrounded by new hires, strong systems, and a thriving company, I realized something profound. He had burned every bridge. I had built an empire from the ashes. It started with spite. That's what people don't understand. They think revenge makes you bitter. That it eats you alive. But in truth, when channeled right, revenge can be a forge. The flame that melts down all the fear, the shame, the humiliation, and molds it into something solid. Something unstoppable. That's what Northern Seal became. In the beginning, it was fueled by rage and betrayal. But as the months turned into years, something shifted. It became more than just a counterattack. It became a mission. To do it better. To build differently. To lead with fire and finish with grace. In our third year, I finally took a vacation, my first in over a decade. I stood on a beach in Oregon, my son Connor chasing the tide with a plastic bucket, and I stared at my phone, not to check for emergencies, but because I didn't have to. My team could run things without me. That was the first moment I realized I'd won. Not just over Derek. Not just over Howard. But over that little voice in my head that used to whisper, "You're just a landscaper. You're not business-minded. You're a single mom. Stay small. Stay safe." I had proven her wrong. And I hadn't done it alone. There was Rachel, my first hire outside the old crew. She came from hospitality and barely knew how to hold a caulking gun. Now she manages our entire government contract division. There was Ben, a soft-spoken veteran who once confessed he almost didn't come to the interview because he was afraid I wouldn't hire someone with PTSD. Now he trains new field leads. There was Lonnie, our youngest technician. 19. Fresh out of community college. She's now designing our social campaigns and speaking at high schools to encourage more women into trades. Each of them reminded me, this wasn't about spite anymore. It was about purpose. One evening, we hosted a company dinner. Nothing fancy, just picnic tables, string lights, and trays of barbecue in the parking lot. Connor helped set up. He was older now, almost a teenager, and taller than me by half an inch, which he never let me forget. I stood in front of our growing team, over 30 employees by then, and tried to say something profound. But all I managed was, "Thank you for trusting me." And that was enough. They clapped. They cheered. Someone started chanting "Boss Lady" and it stuck for months. Later that night, after the cleanup, Connor sat beside me, swinging his legs over the edge of a folding table. "Mom," he said, "do you still hate those guys who didn't pay you?" I thought for a moment. "No," I said truthfully. "I don't." "Even the one who said you'd never make it?" I smiled. "Especially him. Because the truth is, forgiveness isn't letting someone off the hook. It's deciding their failure no longer deserves your energy." Derek and Howard gave me the worst professional betrayal of my life. And I gave myself the best response I could. I didn't sue. I didn't scream. I didn't chase them in the dark. I built something in the light. Years later, I met a woman named Gina. She was going through something similar, ghosted by a contractor, left in debt, wondering if she was crazy for trusting someone who wore a friendly face. I invited her to lunch. This time, I made the sandwiches. We sat in the same kind of kitchen Howard once used to feed me lies. But this time, truth was on the menu. I told her everything. And at the end, I handed her a pen and a blank folder. "Name your company," I said. "I'll help you register it tomorrow." She cried. And I remembered my own beginning. The bitterness. The empty bank account. The fire in my chest. The silence I turned into strength. Today, Northern Seal Insulation is one of the highest-rated spray foam companies in the tri-state region. We've expanded into renewable energy consultation. We mentor startups. We host community cleanups. And not a week goes by where I don't hear from someone new, someone looking for help, for guidance, for a second chance after being burned. I tell them all the same thing. You don't need vengeance. You need vision. Let the injustice fuel your first steps. But let integrity carry you the rest of the way. Because spite might get you started. But love? Love is what builds the legacy.